Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to tonight's class where we are going to be talking all about castor oil and why you should use it, some different recipes, different ideas for using castor oil, how to use it, the benefits of it, all things castor oil. And I would invite you, if you have questions, to put it in the chat or the comments. And even if you're watching this later as a recording, you can also put your questions in there. And I will be coming back later and checking it a couple times to see what kinds of questions and things people are asking, because I know that a lot of people will probably watch this as a recording and they won't necessarily catch it live. So, the first thing I want to do is I want to start off by talking a little bit about myself, who I am, and why I'm talking about castor oil and my personal history and experience with castor oil, how I've used it in the past, how I got into using it, why I decided to do this class, that kind of thing. And we'll talk a little bit about what exactly castor oil is, because I think a lot of us have heard of what castor oil is, but we don't necessarily know exactly what it is. And then after that, we will talk about some of the benefits of castor oil. And then we will talk about how it works and some different ways to use it, as well as some things to think about when it comes to like safety precautions, how to choose a quality castor oil, how often to use it. So, in other words, all the different things about castor oil we are going to talk about. So, a little bit about myself personally and why did I decide to choose this as one of the topics for one of my online classes. And I decided to talk about castor oil because I feel like it's a really underrepresented topic. I feel like it's something a lot of people don't know what it is, or it just doesn't get talked about enough. And it is something I started personally using castor oil probably about 4 or 5 years ago. I had discovered it online. I had heard about from some different health and wellness related people about how good it was, and I started using it. And over the last few years, have found it to be really amazing. So that's the other reason that I decided to start talking about it. About me personally, I'm a podcaster. I have a podcast called Autoimmune Rehab, where I share stories of hope and healing and resilience for autoimmune conditions. Yes, I also got that start through my own diagnosis with Hashimoto's in January of 2018. So we're now on 7 years now that I've had it, but it is more or less almost in remission. I still have a few antibodies, so maybe it's not totally there, but I am definitely in a lot better health shape than I was that 7 years ago. And I feel like, especially the last couple of years, castor oil has definitely been something that has definitely helped to reduce the inflammation and some of those kinds of things that are common when you have an autoimmune condition. I am also a blogger, an Institute of Integrative Nutrition health coach, a doTERRA wellness advocate, an essential oil educator, and then I also have a full-time corporate job working in the tech space. Currently, I'm with a company that sells a product for multi-day group travel. So that's a little bit about me. I also really love to travel. I also am a really big fan of dogs. Just a few other things about me and who I am. And so now let's move on a little bit here to talking a little bit about castor oil and what exactly is castor oil. So, castor oil is, in a nutshell, it is an oil that comes from what's considered the Ricinus culminus plant. And I'm actually going to copy and paste that into the chat in some of the different places that we are doing this so that you can take a look at how it's spelled, because I know that a lot of you are going to be like, what? So that you can see how it is exactly spelled. And so I'm going to go ahead now for those of you on the live and put that in here. Okay, let's see. I'm going to go ahead and put this in here. Okay. So that people can actually see how it's spelled. Okay, finish. It's in here. And if you're watching the recording, you'll be able to get a sense of seeing how it's spelled as well. Okay, there we go. So you should all be able to see how it's spelled. And Yeah, so it is So like it says, castor oil, it's a plant. And what makes castor oil special? Well, there's a couple things that make it special. So one thing is it has a really high, what's considered a high ricinoleic acid content. And basically what that means is that it's a really thick uh, oil, and it's not considered an essential oil. It is considered basically a more or less what you would consider a carrier oil. So, like if you've ever tried to use things like a fractionated coconut oil or an olive oil or a jojoba oil or things like that, it falls into kind of that same category. So it's a thicker type of an oil that you can use on different parts of the body, either solo with itself or with some of different essential oils. And it has a very high potency and actually also absorbs into the body at a much higher rate than a lot of other carrier oils. So that is the main thing that makes it special. It's also been historically used in a lot of herbal medicine and traditional healing. And there's also different kinds of castor oil. So you have regular castor oil, then you also have castor oil that's organic, cold pressed, and hexane free, which is really ideally what you want to find. This right here that I'm showing up is actually the bottle of doTERRA's castor oil. They just came out with the doTERRA one a few months ago. So prior to that, I was using a couple different brands. There's a lot of really good brands out there. You just want to do your research, and ideally, you want to find something that organic is really going to be the main thing. So you want to find some kind of an organic castor oil if you can, and there are plenty of them out there. So you can find all different kinds. And so, what exactly are some of the benefits of castor oil? So, I already kind of started mentioning a few of them. But one of the things, so it breaks down into a couple different categories. So the first category and benefit of castor oil is that it is really good for your hormone and lymphatic support. So more specifically, it helps to support healthy drainage pathways. It helps to reduce stagnation and bloating, and can also help support the liver. Now, I have to say that these categories right here, the main reasons that I originally started using castor oil is because I noticed, that I had some issues with some stomach bloating. I had some issues with, maybe my liver would get a little bit clogged up and that kind of thing. And obviously, I want to also emphasize here that if you have a really severe problem with the liver or things like that, then you obviously, castor oil isn't just going to go fix that. But a lot of us end up with a liver that it gets a little bit clogged. It needs a little bit detoxing. Maybe we have some toxins and things that we've absorbed that are not totally, our detox pathways are not totally open, and we're just not getting that drainage in our lymphatic system that we really should be getting. And castor oil can really help with that. So that's one of the reasons, and we're going to talk a little bit here in a minute about how exactly I use castor oil to help do that. Then the other reason is that it also helps to support your natural inflammation pathway. So a lot of us get a lot more inflammation in our body, and castor oil can help to reduce that inflammation. And it can also help even with things like helping to relieve joint discomfort, cramps. So this has become one of my best friends during that time of the month for me as a woman, and also autoimmune flare comfort. So that has helped me a lot. And so a lot of times people sometimes they hear inflammation, they hear it thrown around, they don't really know, do I actually have an inflammation problem? I can tell you right now, if you have a lot of digestive issues, if you have bloating, if you are overweight by more than just a few pounds beyond what your ideal weight should be, and if you've been diagnosed with any kind of an autoimmune condition, then you definitely have inflammation. So inflammation, I would say, is present in probably 80% of the American population or people that I'm aware of, even not just even American, just, Western civilization, civilized countries. So that would include, Canada and Mexico and a lot of even some of South America and European countries, Australia, New Zealand, all that kind of those places. We pretty much all have, a lot of this Western um, diet and different things like that that helps cause a lot of inflammation. Okay, then the next thing that castor oil can be used for is to help with your digestive support. So a lot of us have a lot of challenges with digestive issues. We might be eating things that might be upsetting our stomach a little bit. We might just have some abdominal tension, that kind of thing, and castor oil can help with that. Again, though, just like the liver, that kind of thing, if you have, anything really severe, you of course want to get seen. You don't want to use this as a replacement for things that are really severe. The other thing is that it can also help with your skin and your hair. So it can help to support like hair growth. It can help you to have nicer hair. It can help nourish your dry skin. This is also one of those things that even though it's considered an oil, you can even massage it a little bit, like into the scalp, things like that, to help with the hair. And it's not going to make your hair oily because it's not that kind of an oil. So, initially in the beginning, it might seem a little weird that you're putting something that's called an oil on your skin and your hair and thinking that that's going to create, more oily skin, more oily hair, that kind of thing. But it really isn't. That is just, how this particular thing works. It's called an oil, but it doesn't produce, oily skin and that kind of thing. Okay, so how exactly does castor oil work? So there are a couple of things that it does. So one thing is that it helps with absorption through the skin, just because of the way that its component, that kind of thing. It just is a lot more absorption friendly. It also has a pretty big impact on your lymphatic flow. So what does that mean? That means it can help with your blood circulation, all that kind of thing, your lymph nodes. It also can help with relaxation and connection to your vagus nerve, and you also want to focus more on consistency rather than quantity. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, what I mean by that is you want to be tempting to use castor oil at least, I would say, 3 to 5 times per week. You don't necessarily want to use it every day, but you want to do that more than, trying to put too much on you. And we're going to talk a little bit in a minute when we talk about how to use it and safety, making sure that you don't use too much of it. Okay, so a couple different ways to use castor oil. So I have a couple of my favorite ways. So one of my favorite ways is by using a castor oil pack. So the castor oil pack is especially helpful for things like bloating, your hormone imbalance, your detox support, autoimmune fatigue, digestive issues, all that kind of thing. And there are a couple different ways that you can do them. My personal favorite way, and I found that it just is a little bit less messy when you do it this way, but there are other ways to do it. This can end up long term being a little bit more costly just because you have to buy the things, but hopefully you can kind of see that if you take this white label off, and I don't really want to remove the whole thing, but I'm going to remove a little bit of it just so that you can kind of see what I'm talking about. And obviously, that means that I will need to use this one tonight, probably, which is fine. It's time for me to use one. And then you have a brown side. And basically, if I remove that, you can see how you've got this pad thing. And what you're going to do is you're going to put the castor oil on the pad. And then this part is sticky, and you are able to stick that directly over the abdomen area, which is the main place that I put it. Technically, you can also do like a wrap around like the neck and the thyroid area. So, if you're especially trying to focus on the thyroid, which I do that too, you can also do that. This particular size of the paper one is a little bit too large for that though. So I have this fabric one that I have also used in the past that you can I'd have to tighten it a little bit. This can go on here. Technically, you could also wrap this around like knees, legs. It's a little small for the stomach, but it might fit, a little bit. They also do sell larger fabric ones too. And then what you do is you just put the castor oil on there, and then if you're going to use any essential oils, you mix that in too on with the castor oil and put it on. I have to tell you, these do get pretty messy as the fabric ones because castor oil is, it's a pretty thick oil, and so it does get a little bit, yeah, it gets a little messy. And so personally, that is why I prefer these pack things. I just got these off of Amazon, and yeah, like I said, they are cost wise, it can end up costing a little more to do it this way, but I feel like the oil absorbs a little better. It goes on, it doesn't get to be such a big mess. But anyhow, there's that. And then, if you don't really care about the mess, you can just take a little bit of the castor oil, put it in your palm, maybe add essential oils if you're going to do that. You don't have to. You can do just straight castor oil and then just rub it directly on the area and then, potentially cover your clothes with it or whatever. You can even do it directly on the knee or whatever and, just go solo without any kind of a pack. So that's how you can do it, like in the form of like an abdominal massage or, like joint support. So, if you don't necessarily have to wrap it with a pack, but personally, I really prefer to wrap it with a pack because I feel like it absorbs a little better and just is, yeah, just ends up going into you a little better. So that's just how I like to do it. And then, like I mentioned briefly before as well, if you want to use it on like your skin, you could just put a little tiny, teeny bit on like a skin area, or you can massage a little bit into your scalp. And no, it's even though it's called an oil, it's not going to make your hair oily, that kind of thing. So different ways to do it. So a couple of things to think about when it comes to safety and precautions. So the first thing is you should not be using it while you're pregnant unless, for some reason your doctor says it's okay to do. But that's one thing to think about. It also should not be used internally. So this is not, unlike olive oil, some kinds of coconut oil, things like that. This is not something that you should be eating or consuming. This is not not an oil to take internally. And also, you may want to, if it's the first time you've ever used castor oil, you may want to do something like put a little bit, on a patch a little bit, or try, just a little tiny bit on your stomach, just to make sure that you don't have any kind of an allergic reaction to it in the beginning. Also, you want to be really, really careful using it with the hot oils. So that would mean combining it with things like oregano, clove, things like that, because that can still sting, depending on, how much you use and that kind of stuff. And you also want to be really careful. A lot of people will like to put like castor oil on and then put on some kind of a heating pad or something on top of it. But if you're really like electrical heat sensitive, or if this is the first time you've ever tried castor oil, then you probably don't want to just go do it and then go put the heating pad directly on top of it. You could use something like a hot water bottle on top of it though to help it absorb and the heat and that kind of thing. And I have done that like during my cramps and it actually works pretty well. And the other thing you also want to do is if you do have any kind of an autoimmune condition, you want to be really careful to start slow. Use it, maybe at one every 3 or 4 days in the beginning. Avoid trying to use it every single day. And be really careful to watch for signs of detox overstimulation. In other words, you don't want to be detoxing too much. You don't want to have it absorbing you too much. So you want to just be careful there as well. So a couple of things, as far as finding a quality castor oil, basically you're looking for organic and cold pressed, and ideally it comes in a glass bottle rather than a plastic bottle. Those are really the main things that you're looking for. I will share in a few minutes at the end the link to the one that I've got that I'm using. You can check out for others as well. And so a couple of things for a routine for actually using castor oil. So what I recommend doing, and there's a couple different ways, like I said, that you can do it, but I personally like to use one of these at night right before bed. So obviously, since I've kind of started opening this one, this is going to be the one I'm going to put on tonight. And then I just keep it on all night long until I get up in the morning and take it off, when I'm getting dressed for the morning, that following morning. You can do it in the morning, but I feel like lying down at bed at night and having it just absorb in through the night works a little bit better for me. And that's just really my favorite way to do it. And ideally, usually I do it about 2 to 3 times a week, but you could do it a little more. But like I said, I wouldn't do more than that in the beginning till you see how your body reacts to it. So, couple of additional things that I want to show you. And so what I'm going to do is, if you're watching the recording or watching this on Zoom, you'll probably be able to see it. I'm not sure if those of you watching on social media will be able to, though. So you might have to find the recording and go look at it to be able to see it. So now I'm going to screen share and show a few images. Okay, let's see here. And that's my notes from it. That's that. Okay. And so the first thing I wanted to show is a couple of recipes. So this is, for example, a tension balm. So this can be put like on your neck or your feet, or you could actually even use the castor oil pack for this. And this is where you take a tablespoon of your castor oil and you combine a couple drops of lavender and vetiver to really help improve your overall sleep. So that's just one recipe idea for you. And then I'm going to show a couple other recipe ideas. So then this is another recipe idea. And I have to say, especially during cramping time, this one has really worked well, is 2 tablespoons of the castor oil, 5 drops of clary sage or clary calm, and 3 drops of geranium and 2 drops of copaiba. So that, I've had really good success with that. And then the other thing as well is I'll show a little more of these instructions here. So like you can kind of see here, like on the castor oil pack, in this particular one, there's a fabric one, but same thing would work for the paper one that I was showing earlier is you unfold the wrap, and once you've got it ready to the side where you need to have it on, you put 1 or 2 tablespoons of castor oil directly onto the pack. And you want to be really careful that you don't use more than 2 tablespoons, I might add, because like I said, it's a thicker oil that gets really messy. And so if you put too much, it can really create some issues. And then add whatever essential oils you want to do, and then apply the wrap to the area and try to secure it if you're using like a fabric wrap, kind of like in this picture or the one I was showing earlier. Or, if you're using something like this, it'll just stick onto you. And then, like it says here, it says only relax 30 to 60 minutes while they absorb. I like I said, to do it right before bed and relax all night long. And so then a couple other of my favorite essential oil blends that I like to use. So another one would be like the Deep Blue blend, which is one for a lot of joint relief and discomfort and that kind of thing. So that can really help. And then Digest Zen is another really good one. It's a blend for your stomach. So you can put a few drops of that with the castor oil and help, with the bloating and that kind of thing. So anyhow, those are just a few of my favorite things and ways that I like to use castor oil. So if anybody that's watching this either on the Zoom or on my social media has any questions and you want to type out the questions in the comments, you can go ahead and do that. In the meantime, I'm also going to come in to a couple of the different places here, and I'm going to post the link to my castor oil, and you can go check it out. And let me go find it a few other places. Okay. This is where the castor oil is on there. Okay, let's see. So yeah, if anybody that is watching live has any questions, feel free to ask. Otherwise, if you've caught this as the recording, I would be more than happy to answer your questions. So you can post in the comments. And let's see, if anybody has any specific questions, I'm gonna try to go check my other social media here. Let's see. And see if anybody else has any others. Uh, and let's see. Looks like I might be having a little bit of an internet problem. So, I mean, it looks like here on Zoom we're okay, but on some of the social media there might, I don't know. We'll have to see how well that worked. So anyhow, it doesn't look like I'm able to find any specific questions that anyone has. So that's going to be it for now. And if you come up with any, you can go ahead and let me know later.